Jeffrey Dahmer was born on May 21, 1960 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. As a teenager, Dahmer began to exhibit bizarre and disturbing behavior, including alcohol abuse and fascination with dead animals. Dahmer's killing spree began in '78 when he was just 18 years old. Over the course of 13 years, he murdered 17 male victims. Most of his victims were young gay men he lured to his apartment with promises of money or alcohol. Dahmer would drug his victims, strangle them, and then engage in sexual acts with their corpses. He would dismember the bodies and keep various body parts, including heads, in his apartment. Dahmer's crimes were discovered in '91 when one of his intended victims managed to escape and alert the police. Dahmer was arrested and charged with 17 counts of murder and various crimes. In '92, he pled guilty but insane. However, the jury rejected his insanity defense and found him guilty of all charges. He was sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms in prison. In just 2 years, Dahmer was beaten to death in prison on November 28, 1994 by another inmate. Ted Bundy, aka the Charming Killer, was born in 1946. It is believed that Bundy had a difficult childhood, with some speculating that he may have suffered from a personality disorder. What made Bundy so terrifying was his ability to charm his victims. He used his looks and charisma to target young women who fit a specific profile. Most of his victims had similar physical features and were often college students. He would approach them under the pretense of needing help, typically with his arm in a cast or faking an injury. Gaining their trust, he would abduct them. Bundy used various methods to control his victims, including physical force, deception, and manipulation. His crimes escalated over time, including sexual assault, mutilation, and murder. After leaving trails of terror through the '70s across multiple states, Bundy was pulled over for a traffic violation. The police found incriminating evidence linking him to the disappearances of several women, arresting Bundy on the spot. He was found guilty, convicted of 3 murders and 3 attempts. He later confessed to 30 murders. Bundy escaped custody twice, eventually being recaptured. On January 24, 1989, Ted Bundy was executed in the electric chair, leaving behind a dark legacy and countless unanswered questions. Richard Ramirez, aka the Night Stalker, was born in El Paso, Texas in 1960. He had a troubled childhood, with his father being physically abusive towards him and his siblings. Ramirez also suffered from epileptic seizures, which caused him to have a difficult time in school and socializing with others. Ramirez's criminal career began in his teenage years when he started using drugs and became involved in petty theft. In '84, Ramirez moved to California and started his spree of violence. The Night Stalker's crimes were heinous. He would break into homes at night, often through unlocked windows or doors, and brutally attack his victims. He would rape, torture, and murder men, women, and children, often leaving satanic symbols at the scene of the crime. After months of terrorizing the Los Angeles area, Ramirez was finally caught by a group of citizens who chased him down and held him until the police arrived. He was convicted of 13 murders, 5 attempted murders, and 11 sexual assaults, and 14 burglaries. In 1989, Ramirez was sentenced to death. John Wayne Gacy was born in Chicago, Illinois in 1942. He had a difficult childhood with an abusive father who often beat him and called him names. Despite this, Gacy was a popular student in high school and was even elected president of his class. Gacy's criminal history began in '68 when he was charged with sexually assaulting a young boy. He was convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison, but was released after only 18 months for good behavior. In '72, he was arrested again for sexually assaulting another boy, but managed to get the charges dropped. In '76, Gacy began his killing spree and now taken on his clown persona, dubbing him the Killer Clown. He lured young men and boys to his home under the pretense of offering them work, money, or candy, and then sexually assaulted and murdered them. Gacy buried most of his victims in the crawl space beneath his house. In '78, one of his victims managed to escape, and Gacy was finally caught. In March 1980, Gacy was convicted of 33 sex-related murders and given the death penalty. Aileen Wuornos, known as the Damsel of Death, was born on February 29, 1956 in Rochester, Michigan. Her childhood was far from ideal. She experienced a tumultuous upbringing, characterized by abuse, neglect, and instability. Wuornos claimed to have been sexually abused by various individuals during her adolescence, which only added to her growing rage and desperation. Aileen's troubled past followed her into adulthood, leading her down a dark path. In the late '80s and early '90s, she embarked on a horrifying killing spree, targeting men along the highways of Florida. Wuornos would later admit to murdering 7 men, all of whom she claimed had assaulted or threatened her. Aileen was eventually apprehended in '91, bringing her reign of terror to an end. Her trial gained national attention, with many questioning her mental state and the impact of her troubled upbringing on her actions. Wuornos was found guilty and sentenced to death. She was executed by lethal injection on October 9, 2002. Charles Manson was born on November 12, 1934, in Cincinnati, Ohio. He would later become synonymous with evil. Raised in a troubled environment, Manson's childhood was riddled with neglect, abuse, and run-ins with the law. As a young man, Manson found himself in and out of jail for various offenses. It was during these periods that he developed a fascination with manipulating vulnerable individuals and honed his skills as a charismatic speaker. In the late 60s, Manson formed a cult-like following known as the Manson family. Manson believed in a bizarre theory called Helter Skelter, which prophesied an apocalyptic race war. His ability to captivate and control his followers became evident as he gradually gained their loyalty with the promise of an alternative way of life. Manson's reign of terror reached its climax in August '69 when he orchestrated a series of brutal murders, including the infamous Sharon Tate and La Bianca killings. Although Charles Manson himself did not commit the murders, his manipulation and control over his followers were undeniable. On January 25, 1971, Charles Manson was found guilty on all 7 counts of first-degree murder of the Tate and La Bianca killings and sentenced to life. David Berkowitz, born in Brooklyn on June 1, 1953, was a serial killer who terrorized the streets of New York City during the mid-70s. He was known as the 44 caliber killer for using the same 44 special caliber bulldog revolver, but better known as the Son of Sam. He believed the demon lived inside the black Labrador retriever owned by his neighbor named Sam Carr. David claimed he was obeying this demon-manifested dog who was commanding him to kill. The Son of Sam's first murder was on July 29, 1976, claiming his first victim. Over the next year, he would go on to murder 5 more innocent victims and injure several others, from Nassau County through the Bronx, Queens, down to Gravesend Bay, Brooklyn. The city was gripped by fear as the killer taunted the cops and the public with cryptic messages, sending letters to the media and police, escalating the level of public panic to unprecedented heights. It wasn't until August 77, when a parking ticket led them to David's car, that they finally caught a break. They arrested him the following day, and the city breathed a collective sigh of relief. David pleaded guilty to the 6 murders and was sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences in prison. Gary Ridgway, aka the Green River Killer, was born on February 18, 1949, in Salt Lake City. Ridgway would eventually earn a sinister reputation as one of the deadliest serial killers in American history. Growing up, Ridgway exhibited disturbing behaviors such as torturing and killing animals, but it wasn't until the early 80s that his gruesome crimes escalated, leaving a trail of fear in his wake. Ridgway's crimes primarily took place in the green landscapes of Washington State, earning him the chilling moniker, the Green River Killer. His chosen victims were often young women, many of them sex workers, whose disappearances often went unnoticed. Ridgway was a master of deception, often luring his victims with promises of money or drugs. He would then strangle them, leaving behind no witnesses. He was cunning, choosing remote dumping sites to conceal his atrocities. For decades, law enforcement agencies struggled to solve the case, and Ridgway managed to elude capture. But in 2001, advances in DNA technology provided a breakthrough, leading authorities straight to the heart of darkness. On November 30, 2001, Ridgway was finally apprehended. He was convicted of 49 murders and exchanged the death sentence to a life one for all his confessions and information leading to the recovery of victims' remains. Ed Gein, aka the Butcher of Plainfield, was born on August 27, 1906, in Wisconsin. He grew up with a domineering mother and an alcoholic father. Gein's mother was a religious zealot who instilled a strict moral code in her son. She viewed women as instruments of the devil, teaching Ed that they were sinful and impure. Between the years 1954 and 57, Gein committed a series of disturbing acts that shocked the nation. He would visit local graveyards and exhumed at least 10 corpses of freshly buried women who resembled his mother. Gein confessed to stealing their body parts and using them to create gruesome trophies and macabre household items. Soon after his mother's death, Gein began to create a woman's suit so that he could become his mother, to literally crawl into her skin. Gein's house of horrors was eventually discovered by the police, leading to his arrest in November of 57. Besides the woman's suit, other things found was human skin covering several chairs, bowls made from human skulls, multiple face masks, 9 vulvae in a shoebox, and a belt made from female human nipples, amongst other gruesome body parts. After his arrest, Ed Gein was declared unfit to stand trial due to his deteriorating mental state. Instead, he was committed to a mental institution where he spent the rest of his life until his death in 1984. The Zodiac Killer terrorized the San Francisco Bay Area in the late 1960s and early 70s, leaving a trail of fear and confusion in his wake. The killer operated in a unique manner, taunting both law enforcement and the public through cryptic messages and ciphers sent to newspapers. Our story begins on December 20, 1968, when the first confirmed Zodiac attack occurred. The victims David and Betty Lou were shot dead while parked at Lover's Lane. On July 4, 1969, the killer shot Michael and Darlene in a parking lot. Darlene survived, but Michael was dead on the scene. 2 more were stabbed in September, with 1 more shot dead in October. Over the next few years, the Zodiac Killer would target random victims in different locations, claiming to have murdered 37 victims. Only 5 murders have been conclusively linked to the Zodiac. What made this case truly unique was the killer's correspondence with the media, sending letters boasting about his crimes and even including encrypted messages, one of which took years to crack, with the killer claiming that he was collecting his victims as slaves for the afterlife. Of the 4 ciphers, 2 remain unsolved and 1 was cracked only in 2020. The Zodiac Killer's reign of terror appeared to come to an end in 1974 when the letters and killings abruptly ceased. This case has never been officially solved.